Imagine if an entire country changed forever in just 100 days. Not because of a natural disaster, not because of an invasion, but because years of fear, division, and political tension suddenly exploded into one of the most tragic events of the 20th century. In 1994, Rwanda was a small nation that most of the world barely paid attention to. Yet within a few months, it became the center of a humanitarian catastrophe that shocked the world. Even more surprising, many warnings existed long before the crisis reached its worst point. How did Rwanda reach this moment? Why didn't the world respond faster? And how did the country manage to rebuild itself afterward? This is the story of 100 days that changed Rwanda forever. Before we understand what happened in 1994, we need to understand Rwanda itself. Rwanda is a small, landlocked country in East Africa. Despite its size, it is one of the most densely populated countries on the continent. For centuries, different communities lived in the region, including the Hutu, Tutsi, and Twa peoples. These identities existed long before modern politics. However, during colonial rule, outside powers introduced policies that deepened divisions between groups. Identity cards were introduced. People were categorized more rigidly than before. Over time, political tensions grew. When Rwanda gained independence in the 1960s, power struggles, distrust, and cycles of violence continued. For decades, these tensions remained beneath the surface. But in the early 1990s, the situation became increasingly unstable, and soon everything would change. Many people think tragedies appear suddenly. History shows something different. Major crises often begin with warning signs. In Rwanda, political tensions were rising. Economic challenges were creating frustration. Armed conflict had already broken out between the government and a rebel movement known as the Rwandan Patriotic Front. At the same time, propaganda became increasingly common. Radio broadcasts and political messages spread fear and hostility. Moderate voices struggled to be heard. International observers expressed concerns. Some warned that violence could escalate, but few imagined how quickly events would unfold. Then came a single event that changed everything. On April 6, 1994, the plane carrying Rwandan President Juvenal Habyarimana was shot down near the capital. The attack shocked the country. Within hours, Rwanda entered one of the darkest chapters in its history. What followed was a period of mass violence that lasted approximately 100 days. Across the country, communities collapsed into chaos. Ordinary citizens found themselves trapped in a crisis that seemed impossible to escape. Families were separated. Entire neighborhoods were transformed overnight. Many people risked their own lives to protect friends, neighbors, and even complete strangers. Others became victims of the growing violence. As events unfolded, international news organizations struggled to communicate the scale of the disaster. The speed at which the situation deteriorated shocked observers around the world. Hundreds of thousands of people fled their homes. Many sought refuge wherever they could find safety. Schools, churches, government buildings, and community centers became places where frightened families gathered, hoping for protection. Meanwhile, fighting continued between government forces and the Rwandan Patriotic Front. The country was not only experiencing mass violence, it was also caught in a civil war. By July 1994, the Rwandan Patriotic Front gained control of the country. The violence largely came to an end, but Rwanda would never be the same. One of the biggest questions historians still ask today is simple. Why wasn't more done to stop it? At the time, a peacekeeping mission operated under the authority of the United Nations. Its commanders warned that the situation was becoming dangerous, yet international governments were reluctant to become deeply involved. Political leaders around the world were focused on other crises. Decision-makers debated what was happening and how to respond. By the time stronger action was considered, enormous damage had already been done. In the years that followed, many governments and organizations acknowledged failures in their response. The events of 1994 became a major lesson in international humanitarian policy. The question remains relevant today. How should the world respond when warning signs appear? And how quickly should action be taken? When the violence ended, Rwanda faced an enormous challenge. How do you rebuild a country after such a devastating tragedy? Infrastructure was damaged. Communities were divided. Millions of people were trying to rebuild their lives. The government introduced reconciliation programs. Local courts were established to address large numbers. The process was not easy, and it remains a subject of debate among scholars and observers. But over time, Rwanda began to transform. Today, Rwanda is often recognized for its economic growth, infrastructure development, and efforts to improve public services. Its capital city, Kigali, is frequently cited as one of the cleanest cities in Africa. The contrast between modern Rwanda and the events of 1994 is striking, yet the memory of those 100 days remains deeply important. The story of Rwanda is not only a story about tragedy, it is also a story about warning signs, about leadership, about division, about the consequences of hatred and misinformation. But perhaps most importantly, it is a story about recovery, a reminder that nations can rebuild even after facing extraordinary challenges. The events of 1994 should never be forgotten, not because history should trap us in the past, but because understanding the past helps prevent similar tragedies in the future. 100 days changed Rwanda forever. The lessons continue to matter today.